Good morning, Greg and Ken.
Chloe, how are you?
Great, thank you. How are you guys
Hello.
doing? I love that background. Wow. Where are you dialing in from today? Am I right in thinking you're still on the West Coast? So it's pretty early for you both.
Yeah, we're in Irvine, California, in the Taco Bell offices, and it's just before 7 a.m. So it was a nice early start for Ken and I this morning.
Nice. Greg, have you got lots of coffee in that cup that I can see there to the left?
I've actually got lots of Mountain Dew Baja Blast. So when I come into the office, I can get free Mountain Dew Baja Blast. So that's one of the benefits of coming in here.
Yes, great plug. Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. Now, I think as we can see from the backdrop, we've got something special that's launching today that we'll delve into shortly. But before we get there, just for our audience and for me, I think it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your experience and your professional journeys. Greg, can I go to you first? Tell me a little bit more about what brought you here right now.
Sure. Well, it's interesting because Rob was the previous presenter. I was actually spent 17 years at Unilever and ran the Dove brand globally back in the early 90s. So it was great to sort of hear that story. So after university, I went to Unilever. From Unilever, I joined PepsiCo, and then PepsiCo shipped me back to Australia from New York, where I was running the Dove brand, and joined KFC as the CMO. Then came back to the US as the CMO for Taco Bell to help turn that around. Met my very good friend and colleague Ken Muench, and went from being CEO to president to CEO of Taco Bell, and then CEO of Yum brands globally. So in a quick nutshell, that's my background. But it's a marketing background and I love marketing. I just love it.
Amazing, quite the journey, Greg. And so, Ken, what about you?
Mine's the flip side of the coin, if you will, on the agency life. So I started off as a copywriter in the early 90s, late 80s, and made my way up to creative director at advertising agencies throughout the US. Eventually went over to strategy and became head of strategic planning of a couple agencies, and then met Greg in 2011, and we helped propel the turnaround the Taco Bell brand. And since then, actually, we broke off, created Collider, which was it's like a consultancy, strategic consultancy made up of a bunch of different strategists and anthropologists and so on. And it was acquired by Yum. Actually, Greg acquired it, and we became part of Yum. I became the CMO of Yum, and here we are. 6 years later, we're working across all 150 countries, 4 brands, helping them reposition and do all sorts of stuff internally as part of Yum.
That's great. Thank you so much. So obviously you're both very well placed to have this discussion with us today. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of R.E.D. and what that stands for and what it actually means, I'd like to hear from both of you on your experience. What's the most important thing you've both learned throughout your careers about creating a leading brand? I don't mind who goes first. Whoever feels most ready to answer.
Yeah, I think in a funny way, I actually think I always say we're human beings, we're not human doings. And we make what I believe I call them unconscious emotional decisions. And so culture, in fact, organizational culture, this is going to sound really weird, but organizational culture plays a huge part in you being able to do amazing marketing. Because if you've got the courage to make really big, bold, audacious decisions and do things, and if they don't work, hey, everything's fine, it was an experience, then that will lead to dramatically better marketing. So it's sort of funny, which is it's actually not so much about the marketing per se, it's about the culture of the organization that you're in, and does it really encourage you to be courageous and do what I believe is breakthrough marketing. Because these days, and we'll talk about R.E.D, but so that's the thing that's most important. We're humans, we make emotional decisions, we don't make sort of rational decisions, and the culture of the organization is critical in the sense of enabling you to be courageous. That to me is what sets great marketing apart from average marketing.
I agree. I don't think you can left brain heck out of a brand. You just can't do that. You got to be able to feel it. It's got to have that emotional resonance. And it's rare to have an organization that supports that really encourages its marketers to take chances and feel it viscerally and be able to make a massive impact with a big brand. It's tough to find those sorts of organizations. I agree.
Yeah, it was funny though. I always said, yeah, we're a marketing company that sold food. We're not a food company. And a lot of people, I think, well, I'm in the car business or whatever business I'm in. We're not. We're actually all in the marketing business, and it's the marketing. What do we market? So, as I said, at Yum, I always said we're in the marketing business. We just happen to market food, but we're not in the food business.
No, I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, so now let's move on to talking about the release of your book, R.E.D, Marketing, which I understand launches actually today. So huge congratulations to both of you. You two wrote it together, which is incredible. I'd love to hear, what's the central premise and how do you think it helps marketers today in this complex environment?
Chloe, that's a great question. I think the central premise for me is that marketing is simple, but it's not easy. And what we tried to do was to come up with a framework that just made it a whole lot easier. And then I think through both using science and the practicality of running 4 brands in 150 countries, we pressure tested and stress tested this R.E.D concept to demonstrate that it actually does work. And so, pre-R.E.D, we were running about 0 to +1 same-store sales growth globally. I think the years since we've been really focused on R.E.D at Yum, same-store sales growth have grown from like 3 to 4%, and total growth is in the more 7 to 8% area. So what I love is it's sort of based on science, but it's also based on real-world practicality, and we believe we can demonstrate that it works. I'll let Ken explain what R.E.D is. But
yeah, I mean, it's essentially what it stands for is relevance, ease, and distinctiveness. And those are the 3 main pillars of marketing. And it's really what you got to focus on. What we did is, as we started rolling out Collider and the impact of Greg around the world in 150 countries, 3 brands. Back then it was 3 brands. We started discovering that there was marketers that were really good at one aspect of marketing. And maybe you're really comfortable making a brand culturally relevant, or maybe you're super comfortable with a creative and you can make a brand distinctive, or maybe you focus on, I don't know, performance marketing. But that's just one aspect of a brand, and we could not be successful globally if the marketers were specialists, if you will, in just one area. So R.E.D encompasses all 3: relevance, ease, and distinctiveness. And we use it to train over 2,000 marketers to get holistic marketers, to get marketers to focus on all aspects of marketing, not just the area that they feel comfortable with, but make it culturally relevant.
And then even within it, like within R.E.D, there's 3 components to relevance. There's functional relevance, there's cultural relevance, and there's social relevance. And I think the importance of social relevance and cultural relevance in particular, we found to be critically important when you're trying to run global businesses in 150 countries, because culture is not the same around the world. It differs dramatically, and it depends on where a country is at and the people in that country at and what is going on. So we learned that, there was 3 parts to relevance, there's a couple of parts to ease, and then obviously this whole thing about making it distinctive. And so that was our ability, that was our chance to try and take a framework, keep it simple, and then make it practical so that people could actually implement it, and it would lead to what at Yum we call SOBO, which is sales overnight and brand over time. Because that really is the role of marketers. Our job is to drive the sales overnight, but at the same time, be building the brand over time. And there are some people that are great at sales overnight. There are some people that are great at brand over time. And what we try to do is to help more people be successful at both.
Okay, great. So R.E.D, relevance, ease, distinctiveness. You mentioned there, Greg, that obviously the relevance breaks down into 3 components. And one that you touched on there was cultural relevance. I'd like to dig a little bit more deeply into that, because I wonder, do you have any examples of what this actually means for a brand, and any kind of real life examples of where you've seen this done well, this idea of cultural relevance?
Yeah, I think there's 2. I'll tell one, and I know Ken's got his favorite.
Sure.
So mine is for a Unilever brand called Softly. If you're in the US, I want you to imagine Woolite. So it's a wool washing brand. It was part of the Unilever ownership, and what happened was it was the market leader. It had about a 70% share in Australia. It was endorsed by the Australian Wool Corporation, all good stuff. And then a radio personality called Martha Gardner, who had a little concoction, a competitor commercialized it and launched it. And the share went from like 70 to 50 overnight, 70 to 50. And so a number of people were given a chance to turn it around, and they did the classic things you taught in school. I'll change the packaging, I'll change the color, I'll change the pricing, I'll change the formula, I'll even change the advertising, right? And none of it worked. And so I got sort of tapped on the shoulder, and I didn't realize it was cultural relevance at the time, but in hindsight it was, which was Australians have an interesting relationship with wool, because the belief is that Australia was built on the back of the merino sheep. And so my mother knitted, my grandmother knitted, I got taught to knit. I'm playing rugby and cricket, and then I'm sort of learning how to knit. So rather than do what other people had tried, we actually created a knitting book with iconic Australian icons, so the Harbour Bridge and kangaroos and koalas and the Vegemite. And that knitting book you could only get if you bought 2 packets of Softly, which is all you need to get through the winter season, because it's pretty short. Well, surprise, surprise, share went back up to 70. It's the largest knitting book ever made in Australia. And it was successful because I think we tapped in to that cultural relevance and insight of just how important wool is to Australians in a cultural context. And so tapping into that enabled us to reassert the brand's cultural relevance, which helped us turn around a 20 share deficit to get us back to 70%. Ken's also got a great one from South Africa.
I do, yeah. I think in the world of fast food, like I said, we go into all these individual countries and help ensure that the brands are growing as quickly as they can be growing and are as strong as they can. We went into South Africa. KFC is an incredible powerhouse there. They have 1,000 restaurants. They're just a massive, massive brand. It's the favorite QSR. It's one of the favorite brands overall. But sales had been down for a while, and we couldn't quite figure out what was going on. They tried to tweak pricing. They tried to, amp up their advertising, but nothing quite worked. And when we dug in, it was really interesting. What was happening was, if you think post-apartheid, there's a period in South Africa called they call it the Rainbow Nation. It was like the coming together led by Nelson Mandela. And there was this moment in time where everybody felt a little bit more together, or that was the idea back then. And that was the idea of the Rainbow Nation. And KFC really was sort of dialed into that era. Literally, some of the ads were holding hands, singing Kumbaya at a park. It represented that sort of togetherness. Really lovely period in time for KFC. And KFC, everybody loved KFC. And what ended up happening, though, is that they had missed a turn in culture. A younger generation grew up, and it was less about the Rainbow Nation. The younger generation grew up in South Africa, and it was more about individual success and hard work and going to school and standing out as an individual. Very different than what it was before. It wasn't about Rainbow Nation. But KFC was still representing that older Rainbow Nation kind of ideal. And so what ended up happening is it became a little bit of a cultural anchor, if you will. It was a little bit culturally irrelevant. And so what consumers would walk up to, one competitor, KFC, that's my dad's brand. That's the kind of brand that was in the past. Or this new cool brand that's, got chandeliers and black walls and is all about me being successful. And so that realization that there was this miss in cultural relevance really forced us to rethink our positioning. The awesome marketers in South Africa, led by Dhruv Kaul, really turned that brand around, and now it's been on a tear for several years because it's been corrected, and that course has been corrected. Is now extremely culturally relevant again.
Right.
And so we've got dozens of those examples throughout the world of Yum, but that's one of my favorite, I'd say.
No, they're brilliant. And I think as well, you can see why in 2021 cultural relevance is so important, because more than it ever has been ever in any other part of the world or any other era of history, our customers are global. We are not held up by barriers of travel and things like that anymore. So actually, it's so important that we need to maintain an awareness of this cultural relevance. So I think both examples are brilliant. What about if we move to the E? So R for relevance, E for ease. Now, many marketers might not see ease of access as relevant to them, but Why do you think that's wrong, Greg?
Well, I actually made a statement a while ago, which was easy beats better. And I sort of got pillared for making that comment because everyone was like, oh, well, better always beats better. And I talked about, again, when I was back at Unilever and, Whisk and Persil would make your shirts white and Tide and Errol would make them white. And we'd have this huge fight over who could make a white shirt whiter. If you think about it today, it's all about pods, right? So it's all about ease. And because we live in the Amazon world, which is they've made everything easy. And so I think even in the pandemic, what's also happened is a lot of habits changed because of the pandemic. And so we picked up these new habits. So there were habits in our industry, which was obviously people were having delivery and people were using digital. And this was sort of nascent. It was starting, but it exploded under obviously the pandemic. And so I honestly believe that if a brand isn't easy to access, easy to pay, all the things that have to do with easy, then you are just, you're going to miss out. And it was funny when we first started it, we just actually had R&D. We had relevance and distinctiveness. And then we realized that ease had become probably one of the most important. So giving your customers more ways to access you, we just found to be critically important. And in this industry, having a drive-through during the pandemic, which was still allowed to be open, was really a way of keeping the business viable and going. And then obviously delivery has grown dramatically. And so ease is critically important. And to the point where I still think that, easy beats better. It's still a valid, no provocative claim.
That's exactly right. And I would argue that as marketers, we overlook that ease part at our own loss. You can advertise and you can hit somebody over the head with messaging to try to eventually change their point of view, or you can make the product easier to get and they will change their own mind because we post rationalize. As humans, that's the interesting thing. We post rationalize our choices. And so if we make that choice that much easier, then the consumer ends up post rationalizing the reason why. The example I give is I don't like Snickers chocolate. There's something
there's
about,
no one from Mars.
I know. I'm sorry. There's something about the taste that I don't like Snickers, but it's free at the office. And so what ends up happening is that that's the chocolate that I eat. And I catch myself believing, it's not so bad after all. And I end up quite a bit of Snickers. And it's only because I force myself to step out of that dynamic that I realize, no, because it's easier, I convince myself that I like it. So our job as a marketer is not just to make the product appealing and to make it desirable and to make people want to reach out for it, but make it easier to access. And it gives you a tremendous push, even on your brand perception scores. So
I think there's not a lot of functional difference in a lot of products that are out there. I mean, as a marketer, you may believe your product is functionally better than another product. But in hindsight, there's usually a cascade of brand, a group of brands that you'll choose from. And then, so the question is, what makes you distinctive? What makes you the choice? And one of the answers is how easy is it to get it? And the other thing to remember is Amazon is the standard. So even in your category, if you've got a competitor that may make it easier than you, that isn't really the competition because consumers are using Amazon and they're going to compare your easy to Amazon easy. And the question is, do you pass the test?
Yeah, we've got some slides up there. I don't know if you want to show them, but there's a slide there on ease. That's a bad word there. Let's see. There we go. That's the hotel. Here we go. Right. Yeah. Those are some sexy kernels. And there we go. That's our ease slide right there.
Mm-hmm.
This is an example of making the brand easier. And these are led by in general marketers that are saying, okay, how can I make the process of getting fried chicken, pizza, tacos, burgers, how can I make that easier? That's a 5-lane drive-through in Australia. That's just gangbusters. That's contactless curbside pickup. You would just drive up to a Pizza Hut after placing your order, pop your trunk, and they would lay the pizza in the trunk during the pandemic. Or, what Taco Bell's done with their app was just make it incredibly streamlined, reduced all sorts of clicks from it. All those are marketing. Because
they
that
are
changes marketing responsibility to do that. That's right.
Great, thank you. I wonder, in a parallel universe, if you hadn't actually explored E for ease, what acronym you may have ended up with if you hadn't ended up with R.E.D. That would have been quite good. Maybe RAD, perhaps,
Well,
living
there's a
in.
funny story. Chloe, there actually is a funny story. I mean, this is how silly we were. When we added E's, it was ERD.
Yeah, that's right. We had the R.E.D system.
We had the R.E.D system. And then our CMO in India was like, you think you might just want to call it RED? It might just be a little better. So even as authors of the book, we needed to practice what we preached.
I think that's a good example, isn't it? If sometimes when you're too involved in something, you need to take a step back and maybe say, okay,
Yes.
let's switch those letters around. So on that note, then, let's move to D. So, Greg, you mentioned it there. It's about being distinctive. Does this just mean standing out, or what makes this element so important to marketers of 2021?
Yeah, I think the old thought was differentiation. The new thought is distinctiveness. I think it's less about differentiation, which sort of drives you back into this sort of functional relevance, and it's more about being distinctive. And distinctiveness is also about making sure you've got a consistent brand voice, which you obviously execute against. The bong and not this bong, but the bong and the Taco Bell ad. Which finishes all Taco Bell ads. So even if you don't see the ad, you'll know it was a Taco Bell ad. I think there's also just in this whole idea of distinctiveness, there's also being courageous. And I'll get Ken to flick up the first one. A few years ago, we ran out of chicken in the UK. Well, it's not very good when you run out of chicken and you're a chicken chain, right? And so we basically, typically when you run out of chicken, you'd apologize. Well, this is what we ran. This was the headline of full-page ads in the UK, where we obviously said, FCK, we're sorry. And I think there was two parts of this. I think it's incredibly distinctive. It's also socially relevant, I think, in both of those. And the turnaround from this catastrophe, which is we couldn't deliver chicken because the distribution system broke down, you don't need to know the story. Our ability to go out and be this distinctive, but still distinctive and known as KFC. It's not like we just found three letters that didn't make sense. We just reordered them. That really the recovery time was so much dramatically better than when you would traditionally just go out and go, either you say nothing because you just want to hide because you've been, you can't supply chicken. So I think there's two things in here. One, this was incredibly distinctive, but it was distinctive and clearly KFC. And I think the third point is back to my first comment, which it was incredibly courageous. So I love this piece of work because I think it demonstrates distinctiveness that can only come from KFC and the courage to actually go out and execute that in the marketplace. Randall Stevenson, who was then the CEO of AT&T and a friend of mine, he took that ad to his executive committee and he asked them, would they have the courage to run an ad like that? And the answer was no. So again, don't underestimate the importance of courage in trying to do, distinctive marketing.
No, that's brilliant. I bet you can sell those buckets for quite a lot of money if you can get your hands on a FCK bucket there. No, that's great. I mean, the book sounds so good, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it and give it a read myself. But I'd like to now go back into a little bit more of your experiences. And you've both had decades of experience in marketing. Now we're in 2021, and it's been a hard few years. But not only that, it's been a decade of change. So what do you think has changed from the marketer of a few decades ago to the marketer of 2021? And is there a different required skill set, perhaps?
Oh, well, definitely. I mean, I have, having been a CEO for a while, I haven't done any sort of day-to-day marketing for a long time, but the amount of data that you've got access to today compared to the data I had when I was in marketing, I sort of salivate about the ability to know so much more about my consumer than I knew back when I was at Unilever and obviously in my early days marketing at KFC and Taco Bell. However, data alone is not going to make you a great marketer because everyone has got access to the same data. So the question is, what insights can you draw out of the data? And then secondly, can you apply the R.E.D principles to actually execute whatever insight you come up with? And I often see people interuse the term, they say, oh, I've had an insight. And I often go, no, that's not an insight, it's an observation. An observation is what's going on, and insight is why it's going on. And I find, or I found, people go, oh yeah, we had this insight. I'm like, no, that's just an observation. And you've got to dig deeper than the observation to get to the insight, if in order to make a great, breakthrough. And so I think that's just another little sort of trick of the trade, that just make sure you're answering, why is whatever happening, not just what is happening. And I think that's also critical to great marketing. So data, digging deep into the insights, not getting caught in observations. And then even when you've got all this data and you've got the insight, making sure you apply the R.E.D principles in order to drive sales overnight and build the brand over time. That to me is the big difference between, when I was doing marketing and today.
I think so. And I think about the data part's really interesting, because I think in many ways, what we've noticed is that data has had an unintended consequence of making people a little bit more narrow-minded, a little bit more focused on small, a little bit more focused on the sales overnight, but not the brand over time.
Right.
And that's been the biggest problem, is suddenly you've got all this data, this potential to find all this insight, but you end up cutting it so fine or thinking about it so narrowly that all you're worried about is those sales overnight. So that's been, I think, the big siren song of this generation for marketers, which is data, and then focus on those. I can trigger those sales over. What happens if you do that is 2 or 3 months later, your sales fall, your brand starts hurting. You lost the bigness. So despite
we had a great example in one country, which we won't repeat, where they did this massive segmentation study.
Yeah.
And they segmented the market into like 8 different segments. And then they started marketing to each of these segments. And so instead of appearing as this huge, big brand in this country, we looked like this little eighth of a brand in trying to do all these things. It was a complete disaster.
Yeah.
So, I think you just can't take some basic concepts and go, oh, we'll just segment it and we'll just pick a segment and we'll go after it. I mean, at the end of the day, you want as many people as possible. One of the things about functional relevance is, how many opportunities can you provide for your customer to sort of get at your brand? How many places can you put it in, and things like that? So, you can't just fall into the trap of, oh, I did a segmentation study, or I did a problem detection study. That's all fantastic, but that alone does not result in great success.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, that's brilliant. And now, Greg, you've mentioned a couple of times the C word, courage, or being courageous. What we heard yesterday from one of our speakers was the importance of having compassion and empathy. Where can the two meet in the middle? How can you be both courageous and have compassion? Is there a way to get the balance?
Well, I think sometimes being courageous is to be compassionate. I don't think, I think they can live together. What you're courageous about, it could be about empathy, it could be about kindness, it could be about niceness, it could be, so courage doesn't have to mean a tough, bad, macho-y thing. Courage just means the confidence to do what is right for your brand, whether that's, we need to talk more about kindness or empathy or whatever that is. It's just the courage to say, if this doesn't quite work out, is my career going to be okay? Or am I in a culture where if I make one little mistake, it's like, boom, they shoot you and, you're sort of gone. And that's why corporate culture to me is so critical. I mean, Meg Fallon, who ran the FCK work in the UK, if we did not have a great culture at Yum and KFC, there's no way that work would ever have got out. And someone would have had the idea, or someone would have sat in the room and said, oh, let's do FCK. That'll be really hilarious because everyone will know what we're really saying. And someone would have said, oh yeah, but we can't run that because we'll all get into trouble. That's what you've got to avoid. So I don't link courage with sort of macho-y, aggressive, it can be around the things that really matter: empathy, caring, kindness, all those sort of values. You still have to be courageous in order to execute against them, because a lot of our bosses are financial people and they love left brains and they love numbers. So if you walk in there and say, hey, I'm going to run this really empathetic campaign, again, I'll go back to the Dove work, the Real Women campaign is brilliant. Just brilliant. I wish I'd have done it when I was running Dove. But that takes courage, because that's not what everyone else in the category is doing. So I think they are very complementary.
Yeah, so they're not mutually exclusive. No, that's great. So it's really about courage in your convictions more than anything else.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. No, that's perfect.
I think so many times we know what we want to do, and you sit in a room and you go, we should do this. And the question is, do you actually have the courage to go do it, whatever the this is? Or do you just go, oh no, I'm going to get into trouble. I got to play politics. That to me that's the question you're asking yourself.
No, that's great. And so, Ken, obviously, CMO at Yum Brands, you are a leader in marketing globally. And I wonder your opinion on the future of marketing leaders. How important do you think it is to the marketing world to develop grassroots for marketeers and marketers worldwide?
Yeah, I think that there's a huge, I would say, I'm torn always because I do see this like new batch of marketers coming in that are just so brilliant. But I do feel like there is a need to reinvest in that youth and reinvest in a more diverse youth. To be honest with you, I just feel that there's so much potential out there that has been untapped, that has been historically marginalized, and we can really double down and benefit from that insight and from that different point of view.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Cultural relevance and cultural trends don't come from old white guys like us. Let's just get
Yeah,
to the chase.
he said that, not me.
I said that because I'm a decade older. But that's not where cultural trends come from.
Yeah, that's right.
And Ken's absolutely right, which is if we don't tap into the diversity and where culture emanates from, whether it's fashion, music, food, then we are going to not be culturally relevant. We're not going to be successful. So I think having greater diversity in the marketing departments,
Incredible.
I think is incredible, and allowing that diversity to have a voice, because it's one thing to be present, it's another thing to influence. And I think Ken is absolutely right. And when I was running Yum, we spent a huge amount of time trying to make us a much more diverse organization, not so we could check a box, because it would actually enable us to come up with better cultural insights, and I think make us a better company and better.
Oh yeah, instantly. So if you invest, literally invest in that generation of diverse, young, creative thinkers, the rewards are several fold, and I think that's where the opportunity lies for us.
Yeah, so not only several fold, but also long lasting, aren't they? Because you're really investing in the future generations, and that's the most important thing. I've got one more question for you both before we bring some of our audience members up to ask their own. And it is this: why write a book and give away all of your secrets?
That's a really good question. I think there's the most important thing about the book, and I want everyone to know, is Ken and I and Yum are not making a penny. Every dollar from the book goes to the Yum Foundation to support our employees and the communities in which we obviously live, which is, we're a global brand, so global community. So one of the conditions I had was I won't write the book unless all the money goes to charity. So that was really important. And yes, someone said, well, you're giving away the sort of family secrets. I think there was a conscious reason for doing it. In writing the book and hopefully sharing the stories, a lot of which are about Yum, I honestly hope it attracts great marketers who want to come and work at a great marketing company. As I said earlier, I don't see Yum as a food company. We're just a marketing company that happens to market food. And so for me, this was a great way of getting the story out and people hearing the stories, the successes and some of our failures, is I think actually will attract hopefully great marketers to want to come and work at all the brands and at Yum. That was really the reason for doing it. And we've given away some of the secret sauce, but we haven't given away all of the secret sauce. And part of the secret sauce is, even if you've got the framework, you've still got to go and execute the framework.
Yeah.
And that's what in the book, what we tried to do is be provocative around a few things, but also very practical. In every chapter, we ask you questions. So this isn't a book for fast food people. This is a book for any people, whether you're in CPG, whether you're in finance, it doesn't matter what you're in. We tried to make it practical as well. So that was the reason for writing the book.
I think that's absolutely the selfish reason, which is we want those great marketers at Yum. Yum is truly, and anybody that's worked there will know that I'm not exaggerating. It's the best place to work for a marketer. You have freedom and independence in every country to activate the brand in your own slightly different way. It's an exciting place to be. And then I think from an intellectual standpoint, look, marketing is fun. Marketing is really, really intellectually challenging and fun and subjective, and it makes it exciting to debate it. even within Yum, we spend days and hours debating, nuances, and it's a fun thing. So it just really was a fun project to sit down and, it's a system that we developed, started developing in 2011, formalized it in 2015, have been refining it for the last 6 years. At this point, marketers have already gone through Yum, know the system, and have moved on to other brands. We're not really giving away much that people don't already know that they took away with them from their experience at Yum. So we just said, hey, let's put this out there. Let's make it a big public debate. Let's have some fun, and let's bring some talent to Yum.
Great, sounds good to me. So on that note, let's welcome some of our audience members up to deliver their own questions. First of all, we have Joshua from Channel Bakers, who's going to join us on the stage. Hello again, Joshua. Is your question for specifically either Greg or Ken, or for both of them?
Oh, geez, I don't even know where to begin. Number one, I'm right here around the corner from you guys in Anaheim Hills, and your book is already going to be delivered before I get home from the office today, which is pretty rad. And Ken, I absolutely love what you said about young creative talent. In the last year from the pandemic, we've hired over 100 new employees right here in Orange County, and I hire them from the local schools, and then we teach, train, and mentor them to become strong leaders and marketers. So it's really exciting to hear you say that, which is a great segue to my question. I get asked all the time as a CEO of an agency, especially in the retail media landscape, where tech is all of a sudden a thing. And the question I get asked is, do you think, and I'm going to pose it to you guys, do you think AI and tech will ever replace the marketer, especially with, you guys early on talked about emotions and feelings and experience, right? I see you both smiling because you've probably been asked the same. So what do you think?
Well, I think, how do you know that we're really here? Yeah, no. I would say there's not a chance. I think that, if we keep on going down this path right now where marketing is headed, which is very, very left brain and analytical and very much driven by sales overnight, then yes, AI will take over that. But the reality is there will always be brands that are big, bold, creative, exciting, and emotive. And those brands will always reap more rewards. And that, I don't think, can be created by artificial intelligence. I just don't think it's feasible. I think the other stuff, like sales overnight, I think some of that can be replicated. We have a marketing performance analytics company that we just bought, and the AI that they do is pretty intense and pretty advanced, massive samples of, crazy data with some incredible insights. A lot of what a marketer used to do can be replicated by that, but not the right brain stuff. I think if we are all very conscious about keeping marketing on the right brain side of the equation, then we can all be safe from the robots. That's my advice. That's my suggestion. I don't know you.
Oh no, I completely agree. I always say, I give you another example, which is, what's the functional role of the car to get you from A to B? So a Kia and a Bentley driven for 1 hour at 80 miles an hour will go how far? Answer 80 miles. So why would you buy a Bentley? You don't buy it for a rational reason. You buy it for a lot of emotional reasons, right? And by the way, I'm not saying having a Bentley is a bad thing, but so if we can't get caught up in the rational and the functional, that is just not how we make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Hopefully that helps, Joshua. Thank you for jumping up again to ask such a brilliant question. Thanks, Joshua. Greg, Ken, I mean, again, huge congratulations on the book being launched, especially after a decade, as you said, of passion and experience and knowledge all going into that. I will leave you both to now enjoy your morning on the West Coast, have some more Mountain Dew, and enjoy the rest of your day. But I can't wait to see it out in the shops, and hopefully we'll get it in the UK pretty soon so I can get my hands on it. But we'll speak soon, and thank you again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Chloe,
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chloe. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you.